the more sort of interesting experience, interesting experience was that we signed our term sheet sort of right after the pandemic hit, literally like days after lockdown. And so we had assembled kind of a group of investors who we knew were going to follow our lead investor. And I don't know if you remember these, it's hard now actually to remember that this happened, but you know, in the US, and I believe everywhere, the stock markets crashed, and then there was a massive crash. And so we signed our term sheet actually the day the stock market bottomed. So it was the lowest day. And we had investors who was planning to come into our round who had massive capital markets exposure. And also then other investors who were just, their companies were, you know, kind of, you know, in panic, and, you know, who knew what was going to happen. You know, they were worried about protecting their existing portfolios. It was this period of probably like 2 months of just complete, I won't say mania, but it was very panicked environment on the investor side. And so we had a number of investors who backed out with good reason, right? They were either, their capital markets exposure was massive, they lost a lot of money in the near term. They had huge issues with their portfolio companies, and they decided to reallocate to their portfolio companies. And so for us, then rebuilding very quickly a syndicate. So you saw we end up so oversubscribed, it worked out fine for us. But rebuilding a syndicate in a really short time in that environment where everyone was very, essentially, I mean, scared is maybe not too, is the wrong word, but everyone was very nervous and no one knew what was going to happen. And our whole investment pitch had to change. And that was, I think for us, was interesting. It went from being the promise of the technology and blah, 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 to if this environment persists, like where we are right now, this dire financial situation, and you have to dramatically change your plans to make your investment last from like X years to Y years, or, you know, something happened, you know, it was every apocalyptic downside scenario you can imagine. That was all they were interested in. And so, you know, for us, like getting in their mindset and saying, okay, we're going to actually proactively go out and address all of these questions was very interesting. And so for me, that was I guess it was interesting. It was very, it was eye-opening, to put it mildly. But I think how we got through that and how we ended up where we were was because we stood in their shoes, and we said, instead of saying, which I think would have been easy, which is like, oh my God, like the sky's falling and we're not going to get the money. We immediately pivoted and we said, we understand what's happening, and we're going to proactively go out and solve their problem for them. And that sounds a bit glib, but to say, we're going to understand how they want to perceive us. And if we can make that, if we can give them confidence that we as a management team can manage any scenario, then the underlying value of the technology, which had led us to build a really good investor syndicate before, should still be there. And that was what got us through. And that was what ended up with the investment round being what it was. So that was very interesting. And it's interesting for me. I look now at how buoyant the markets are, you know, and how many rounds are going through. It's really easy to forget that there was this moment where nothing was happening. There was sort of this paralysis.